How big a hit has the world's nuclear industry taken in the months since the Fukushima nuclear plant was devastated by the Japanese earthquake? Germany and Italy have made headlines by turning their backs on a nuclear-powered future. But was that the result of a measured risk assessment or an instinctive emotional response? I'm joined by two guests today, John Rich, Director General of the World Nuclear Association, and Sven Giegold, a leading German Green member of the European Parliament. Which is more frightening, a world with or without nuclear power? John Rich and Sven Giegold in Strasbourg, welcome both to Hard Talk.
Thank you.
I'm going to start with you, John Rich. Do you agree that what we have learned since the Fukushima disaster is that publics around the world remain profoundly skeptical about nuclear power?
Yes.
No question in your mind that you have a big problem then?
What we learned from Fukushima was that the public has not yet come to appreciate the virtues of nuclear energy and has not yet come to recognize simply how safe this industry actually is. Keep in mind that at Fukushima there has not been a single radiation fatality. Indeed,
yet.
Well, we have no reason to expect that there will be. There have been some emissions from which people have been protected through an evacuation zone. There have been some plant workers who received dosages that we normally don't like to see, but we've seen no radiation sickness, and we have every reason to believe that this event will end without a radiation fatality. Now, we have a 50-year history of 14,500 years of nuclear power generation in the world. And we have not had any fatalities in that entire history, except those that are associated with Chernobyl, a reactor of a kind that will never be run again.
Well, we can talk a little bit about Chernobyl in a minute, but Sven Giegold, there is an opening statement from the nuclear industry, if you like, which says, let's get real about the risk. And the risk is, if you look at the whole of the industry over the long term, minimal.
Well, I find that rather cynic, seeing what's happening at the moment in Japan. So most of the radiation is in the ocean. Nobody knows how many people will be killed of cancer as a consequence of that. Farmers committing suicide because they are attached to the land which they now have to leave. Many people are affected by the radioactive material. And I must say, this is not the time for statements as we heard it now, as if nothing has happened. It would have been a first sign to say that you were wrong on the basic assessment that at least in the industrialized countries nuclear power is safe. I must find that is a statement very few people will take fully seriously.
But I suppose what you might stand accused of in the anti-nuclear movement, the Green Party and obviously many allies as well, you might stand accused of manipulating public emotion by tying Fukushima, as many anti-nuclear campaigners have, with Chernobyl, for example. And the two, in many, many ways, are not comparable at all, are they?
Well, that is not the point. The German nuclear anti-nuclear movement and also the Green Party is much more rational. I myself, I'm an economist, and Germany has done very well with replacing nuclear energy and fossil fuels by renewable energy. We can run Germany as a small country, highly industrialized, on 100% renewable energy, and we will gain from that in jobs, and we will gain in economic strength, and at the same time we will move into a safer future which is better for our children. So there's nothing emotional about it at all. it's also a rational economic strategy.
Well, we'll talk more about Germany's choices and how it's going to affect the German economy in a moment, but let's just stick with the safety issue for a little bit longer. And I think Sven Giegold's made some very interesting points there, not least of which is this, that of course the Japanese designed these nuclear plants to withstand earthquakes. This one didn't withstand an earthquake, and I'm just going to quote to you from Westinghouse, one of the biggest manufacturers of nuclear power facilities. They have, according to news reports, now acknowledged that one of their new reactors, the AP1000, was, quote, not designed for earthquakes of the magnitude of the earthquake in Japan, and it would need modification for seismic areas.
Well, allow me to correct you. The Japanese nuclear fleet has survived earthquake after earthquake, and it survived the Fukushima earthquake.
Not in a satisfactory way. I mean, not unless you count either the cooling system failing, dangerous radiation reaching the atmosphere and soiling the environment. If you're accepting that, then that's fine.
I'm not accepting anything. I'm explaining to you what happened at Fukushima. At Fukushima, the reactor shut down as planned in response to the earthquake. Had nothing further occurred, everything would have been fine. The Japanese made a fundamental design mistake, not in the design of the reactor, but in the protection of the backup diesel generators, which are expected in the case of every power reactor all around the world to take care of post-shutdown cooling, bringing the reactor down to what is called cold shutdown. This was it looked at retroactively, it was a colossal blunder not to have those diesel generators flood-proofed. In the United States, we've just seen some flooding in the Midwest where reactors actually went underwater, but they had flood-proof diesel generators and nothing malfunctioned as a result of it. Those Japanese reactors were not affected by the earthquake. They were affected by the tsunami that took out post-shutdown cooling. This is not a statement of complacency. It's a statement of specificity about what actually occurred. And it's for this reason that nuclear regulators all around the world are getting together with nuclear operators and making sure that in this very, very narrow but important area of post-shutdown cooling, there are all possible precautions against any possible natural disaster.
You began with a very blunt acknowledgement that there is a public opinion problem.
I do.
Now, the publics around the world have had months to consider Fukushima, to read up on what happened, to listen to opinions like yours and Mr. Giegold's as well. Mm-hmm. And when one looks at the democratic expression of feeling on this matter, look at Germany, look at Italy, it is clear that significant industrialized countries, public opinion has now moved conclusively against nuclear power. Does democracy matter to you?
Democracy matters a great deal to me, and democracy is reflected in the actions taken by democratically elected governments. We've seen this happen in Germany, and we've seen it happen in Italy, and the Swiss have put themselves onto a 3-year path for making a decision. Apart from that, we've seen democratic governments all over the world reiterate and reaffirm their commitment to safe nuclear power in the 21st century. Countries with major programs of nuclear new build, and some of these you can question the degree of democracy, some of them you would not. China, India, Britain, Russia, South Africa, South Korea, other countries that are not immediately going to be engaged in new build are still on the nuclear path. The United States, Canada, Brazil, France,
but
Ukraine.
In many of these countries that you're citing, opinion polls are registering a significant change in public opinion.
I would certainly be surprised and somewhat disappointed if publics were so apathetic as not to be concerned about what happened at Fukushima. But I think as time passes and a rational conversation can be conducted about this, people will be able to be reminded about the essential safety of nuclear power and the powerful necessity that we employ this clean energy technology in the face of the danger of radical climate change, that a danger that faces our own children in their lifetimes.
And Sven Giegold, it is true, is it not, that if one looks across the world at those countries that have embraced nuclear power in one form or another, Germany actually is the country that is out on a limb, because despite various sort of investigations, panels that have been set up in recent weeks and months, most nuclear countries are sticking with the program.
Well, I would like to make one comment first. So until January 2011, there was on the website of the World Nuclear Association, for which Mr. Rich speaks, an explanation about earthquakes and tsunamis and nuclear power, claiming these nuclear reactors in Japan would be safe against tsunamis. Suddenly, this disappeared. Well, about democracy and the relationship to nuclear energy, I have made very specific experiences in my own country. So the 4 large energy corporations in Germany, which are affiliated to your association, they were breaking a contract they have signed with our red-green government 10 years ago, where they supported a phase-out period for the nuclear energy, which had already been agreed in Germany 10 years ago. And then, as soon as we were out of government, there ran a huge campaign breaking this contract, and this has made the Germans so angry. So it didn't start with Fukushima. There were thousands of people on the streets already before. And this is because the companies didn't, the nuclear industry didn't, perform as a real good citizen, but rather tried to change their position totally. And from a global position...
Hang on, you've made 2 very important points there. I just want to put that to Mr. Rich directly.
Okay.
Well, I didn't quite understand which question you wanted me to answer based upon what he said, but
there's 2 important points there. The first point was about your assurances, not least on your website, that these particular nuclear reactors were tsunami-proof, and I
think that's a mischaracterization. We run the world's most widely and heavily used information resource on nuclear energy. We have 140 information papers. We do not offer anyone assurances about anything. We describe how the technology works, and we describe what the industry is doing around the world. Right, I think it's a mischaracterization to say we were offering any assurances.
The second point is hang on, and Mr. Giegold, let's just get through this. The second point was that the big German nuclear companies haven't played fair or straightforward with the German public.
Oh, I think this is a question about German politics and the degree to which German companies were engaging in a phase-out. Let me say about the German phase-out of 17 reactors, which is now planned, that this will be a very, very interesting experiment if it carries forward, because it will begin in the name of environmentalism with Germany increasing its burning of lignite, of coal, of imported natural gas, and perhaps even using imported nuclear power as they seek to make this transition to this, what I regard as a fantasy future of windmills and solar panels. Now, we can watch this unfold with great interest, but no one in the world other than Germany and Italy is following that path.
Well, you've got to address that, Mr. Giegold. I mean, the bottom line is Germany, as I understand it, used to get roughly a quarter of its power from nuclear energy. Obviously, that figure is going to decline gradually through to 2022. But somehow, the country has got to fill that hole. And I'm not quite clear how you think it's going to do it, not least in a environmentally clean way.
Well, I want to make one thing very clear. On the website, and it was very clear under the headline of tsunamis, even for a nuclear plant situated very close to sea level, the robust sealed containment structure around the reactor itself would prevent any damage to the nuclear part of a tsunami. Though other parts of the plant might be damaged, no radiological hazard would be likely. That's the World Nuclear Association before
I think this is a misinterpretation.
And
the tsunami did not
the
damage the containment. The tsunami knocked out diesel generators of a sophistication that you can find on an ordinary farm, which were meant to provide the cooling to cool down the reactor.
Yeah, I suspect you two are not going to agree on this specific point, but I do want to move it on, Sven Giegold, because there are big issues that people around the world will definitely want answers to in this nuclear debate. And one of those questions in Germany is, how do you fill the hole that is left in your power supply when you phase out nuclear?
Well, there are obviously different people in Germany having different ideas about that. But I can tell you what our idea is as German Greens, and what has also been confirmed by several studies, including one made for the Bundestag. and so the German parliament, and that means basically it's possible also for a highly industrialized country such as Germany to replace energy fully by renewables, and for the electricity part, of which we talk when we talk about renewable nuclear, this can be done until 2030 by an aggressive strategy of building renewable energies by a combination, which is not just some solar panels and some windmills, but this is large-scale usage of renewables, and in combination with an aggressive resource and energy efficiency strategy for households as well as industry.
I have to say, I'm struggling. If I may, I'm struggling to see how your party's own commitment to pretty much 100% carbon-free energy by 2050, which I believe is one of your party's commitments, I'm struggling to see how that can be achieved simply by reliance on renewables and energy efficiency. I see no independent experts who believe that is going to be possible.
Oh yes, even the Prognos institution has produced a large study, and that's for whole Europe, and there are several studies on that, how a 100% change strategy can be made. And the interesting thing is that this is not hypothetical, but we are also already producing 18% by renewables, and we can grow that radically, and so far very little has happened on efficiency. So the 100% strategy is calculated and confirmed by several studies, and we have large-scale support for that in the German public, and therefore this will be applied.
Interesting you say that this is not hypothetical, and you indeed cite the 18% figure in Germany. Obviously the UK, let's take the UK. The UK is somewhat behind Germany when it comes to investment in renewables, but it's trying to ramp it up very quickly. But just let me point out to you one of the problems when it comes to talking renewables, and particularly wind energy, which is so important to that whole sphere. The UK's latest output figures for wind farms over the last 2 years, average output over those 2 years was just under a quarter of notional capacity, and during the top 4 peak periods of demand for power, wind output never got over 5% of its notional capacity. That is the fundamental problem with wind. It's not reliable.
Well, that's not fully true. Of course, wind energy is
what's not true about that?
What's not true is that, of course, it is not the key question how many percent of the notional capacity you got, but the real question is how many percent of the total energy needs you can cover by wind in combination with the other sources. And if you do this in an intelligent way, we have already now very often periods when 100% of energy needs in the largest parts of Germany are covered by wind energy. And the whole question is, how can you combine that with the other forms of renewables so that you get to a 100% situation all over the time? And the technology is there, and this is because you can combine it with solar, you combine it with biomass, you can combine it in other areas like the UK with tidal power, which is more constant than wind. And if you combine that with a smart grid, which uses the energy cheaply and offers that to the consumers cheaply when there is a lot of renewable energy, and make it more expensive if there's less, you can get to a 100% strategy and having a boom in jobs, which I'm wondering when all other countries in the world will tend to follow that model.
If Sven Giegold is right, then the businesses you represent are doomed.
Well, the International Energy Agency in Paris has as one of its main functions to analyze how the world can meet its energy needs. And the International Energy Agency is quite, and this has no association of any kind with my business or my industry. The International Energy Agency is quite clear in pronouncing that we cannot possibly conceive of achieving a global clean energy revolution that will meet human needs while preserving the global environment without a massive expansion of nuclear power. And the countries that I have cited to you recognize that, and they are pursuing it. China in the lead. China is not neglecting its research into renewables. That's a valuable pursuit. But it's inevitable that it's going to be a marginal form of energy for at least several decades to come, if not further. China, during the same period that Germany anticipates shutting down its 17 reactors, is going to build 5 times that many new reactors. They're heading where the world vector on nuclear is heading, and that is upward as rapidly as possible.
As well.
As rapidly as possible. The 2 biggest nuclear programs in the world are those of China and India.
Now, Sven Giegold, I just want to have you consider this. Is it not a problem for your position and the passion with which you speak that certainly here in the UK, some of the leading anti-nuclear campaigners of the last couple of decades have now decided that they must embrace nuclear to save the planet? Such is the urgency of the climate change problem that people like James Lovelock, a leading scientist, people like George Monbiot, a leading environmental campaigner, have now said the green movement must shift position.
Well, I can only say that I warmly invite George Monbiot to Germany to have a look at the regions which are already running on 100% energy and how this creates jobs in areas which are otherwise really in economic problems. I can only insist that this is not only an environmental strategy. It's seen as a combination of a technology, industrial policy, and environmental strategy, which and therefore it is pursued by Germany. And I must say it's true that there are countries in the world which are still investing in renewable energy, but the total number of reactors has not increased since the 1990s. And China...
Well, that's going to change, isn't it? China is going to have more than 100 reactors before too long.
And China is investing 10 times more in renewables than they do in nuclear. And that's also China sees its future. But it's true that China has a reason why they go also in nuclear. And that's because there's a link, or has always been, between nuclear energy and military use. And some countries which you have quoted, their main reason why they go into nuclear is because they want access to nuclear material. And this is something which is getting totally lost in the debate. None of your reactors are insured against an accident of the type 9/11. Our world is not going to become less dangerous. So I think a technology which cannot be protected from terrorism is a technology which should not be used. And in particular, if there are harmless alternatives like solar panels, biomass, and a windmill, which can never be as dangerous as what we have seen in Chernobyl and Fukushima.
Let me just say, Stephen, that we have no evidence from any example in history of nuclear power, civil nuclear power, being the source of a military weapons program. When countries have endeavored to create military weapons, they've done so by allocating resources for that purpose and going down that road. This happened with all of the weapons powers that exist in the world today.
Before we end, we must end in a moment, you began with that very simple yes to my question, do you have a public opinion problem? Do you believe in the next few years you are going to overcome that problem, or could this be a watershed moment in a negative way for your industry?
I think it's a watershed moment in the sense that we have been shaken out of a complacency born of having a 25-year record of impeccable safety. We now recognize that we need to go back and review all of our safety precautions, and that we're also reminded that we have a public out there that needs to know more about nuclear, and we need to undertake a program to ensure that they get the education that they deserve to get.
And that is where we have to end the debate. But John Rich, here with me in the Hard Talk studio, and Sven Giegold in Strasbourg, thank you both very much for being on Hard Talk.